Billionaire catches Maid dancing with his deaf twins. What they did next in the kitchen shocked him. Marcus Blackwood stood frozen in the doorway of his Manhattan penthouse, his briefcase slipping from his fingers and hitting the marble floor with a sharp crack. What he saw before him shattered every preconceived notion he had about his household staff. There, in the center of his pristine living room, was Elena Rodriguez, the quiet maid he barely acknowledged, moving her hands in graceful, flowing gestures while his 7-year-old deaf twins, Lily and Lucas, mimicked her movements with pure joy radiating from their faces. But this wasn't just any dance. Elena was teaching them sign language through choreographed movements, turning communication into art, turning silence into song. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and don't forget to comment below with your thoughts. Subscribe to Billionaire in Love for more inspiring stories that will change how you see the world. For 3 years, Marcus had lived in a world of expensive silence. After his wife Sarah's death in a car accident, he had thrown himself into building his tech empire, leaving his children in the care of a revolving door of nannies and housekeeping staff. Lily and Lucas, born deaf, had become increasingly withdrawn, communicating only with basic signs they had learned in their specialized school. Marcus, overwhelmed by grief and guilt, had convinced himself that providing them with the best money could buy the finest education, the most luxurious home, the most qualified caregivers was enough. Elena had been different from the start, though Marcus had been too consumed by his own pain to notice. She had arrived 6 months ago through a staffing agency, her references impeccable, her demeanor quiet and unassuming. What the agency hadn't mentioned, what Marcus hadn't thought to ask, was that Elena's younger brother had been born deaf. She had grown up in a bilingual, bicultural household where Spanish, English, and American Sign Language flowed together like rivers meeting the sea. As Marcus watched transfixed, Elena began to tell a story through her movements. Her hands painted pictures in the air, a bird taking flight, rain falling on flowers, the sun rising over mountains. Lily and Lucas followed along, their small hands creating their own versions of Elena's poetry in motion. For the first time in months, Marcus saw his children laugh, really laugh. The sound, or rather, the sight of their unbridled joy hit him like a physical force. Elena noticed him first, her hands dropping to her sides as her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Blackwood," she stammered, "I'm sorry. I know you don't allow. I was just trying to help them with their homework, and they seemed so frustrated with the traditional methods." But Marcus wasn't angry. He was devastated by the realization of how much he had missed, how much he had failed to see. Lily ran to him, her hands moving rapidly in signs he couldn't understand, her face animated with an excitement he hadn't seen since before Sarah's death. Lucas joined her, both children trying desperately to share their joy with a father who had become a stranger in his own home. "What are they saying?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena translated, her voice gentle but her eyes guarded. "They're telling you about the story we just acted out. It's about a lonely king who learns to see the beauty in his kingdom again." She paused, then added quietly, "They created it themselves. They're incredibly creative, Mr. Blackwood. They just needed someone to listen with their eyes instead of their ears." That night, after Elena had left and the twins were asleep, Marcus sat in his study staring at the family photo on his desk. Sarah smiled back at him, holding newborn Lily and Lucas, her eyes bright with hope for their future. He remembered her words on the day they discovered the twins' deafness. "They're not broken, Marcus. They're just speaking a different language. We need to learn to listen." The next morning, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of heading to his office, he asked Elena to stay after her shift ended. "I want you to teach me," he said simply. "I want to learn what my children are saying." Elena's initial surprise gave way to understanding. "It won't be easy, Mr. Blackwood. Learning ASL as an adult requires patience, practice, and a willingness to make mistakes. I've made enough mistakes already," Marcus replied. "It's time I started making the right choices." What followed were the most challenging and rewarding months of Marcus's life. Every evening, after closing deals worth millions and making decisions that affected thousands of employees, he would come home to sit at his kitchen table with Elena, Lily, and Lucas, learning to speak with his hands. His fingers, accustomed to typing commands and signing contracts, struggled with the delicate nuances of sign language. He felt clumsy, frustrated, often embarrassed by his mistakes. But his children were patient teachers. They giggled when he accidentally signed that he was a beautiful elephant, instead of asking about their day. They corrected his hand positions with gentle touches, their faces lighting up each time he successfully communicated a complete thought. Elena provided structure to their learning, but it was Lily and Lucas who provided the motivation. The real breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening in the kitchen. Marcus had been trying to help Lucas with his math homework, both of them growing frustrated with the communication barriers. Elena had gone home sick with a fever, leaving them to navigate alone. As Marcus struggled to explain a multiplication concept, Lucas suddenly jumped up and began moving around the kitchen, using objects to demonstrate the math problem. He arranged apples in groups, used measuring cups to show quantities, and turned the entire kitchen into a hands-on classroom. Lily joined in, and together the twins transformed mathematical concepts into a physical, visual experience. Watching them, Marcus suddenly understood not just the math problem, but something far more profound about his children. They didn't see the world as lacking because they couldn't hear it. They experienced it more richly because they engaged with it through all their other senses. They had been trying to teach him this lesson all along. When Elena returned the next day, she found Marcus and the twins in the kitchen, covered in flour and laughing as they baked cookies together. The twins were teaching their father the signs for different ingredients, and Marcus was telling them about his own childhood memories of baking with his grandmother, memories he hadn't shared with anyone since Sarah's death. "We made a mess," Marcus said to Elena, his hands moving clumsily through the signs as he spoke. "But I think we finally started communicating." Elena smiled, noticing how the sterile, perfect kitchen had been transformed into something warm and lived-in. Flower handprints decorated the marble countertops, mixing bowls sat unwashed in the sink, and cookie dough spotted the floor. But most importantly, father and children occupied the same space, not as strangers sharing a house, but as a family sharing an experience. Over the following months, the Blackwood household underwent a complete transformation. Marcus rearranged his work schedule to be present for dinner every night. The family established new traditions: Sunday morning pancake making, where all instructions were given in sign language, bedtime story sessions where classic fairy tales were acted out with elaborate gestures, and weekly silent Saturdays, where even Marcus would communicate only through sign language. Elena's role evolved from maid to family friend to something even more significant. Marcus began to see her not as the quiet woman who cleaned his house, but as the person who had given him back his children. Her patience with his clumsy signing, her gentle corrections, and her ability to bridge the gap between his world and theirs made him realize how much he had taken for granted. The challenges weren't over. There were still moments of frustration when communication broke down, times when Marcus's business demands pulled him away from family commitments, and instances when the outside world reminded them of society's misconceptions about deafness. But now they faced these challenges together. The most powerful moment came 6 months later, on the anniversary of Sarah's death, a day that had always been marked by silence and separation in their home. This year, as Marcus sat in the living room where he had first discovered Elena dancing with his children, Lily and Lucas approached him with a special presentation. Together, they performed the story Elena had taught them that first day, the tale of the lonely king who learns to see beauty again. But this time, they had added their own ending. In their version, the king didn't just see his kingdom's beauty, he learned to speak its language. He discovered that the most important conversations happen not with words, but with presence, attention, and love. As Marcus watched his children tell this story with their hands, their faces, their entire beings, he realized that Elena had given him far more than sign language lessons. She had taught him to parent with his eyes, to listen with his heart, and to understand that love doesn't require perfect communication, it requires the willingness to keep trying to understand. 6 months after that, Marcus made another life-changing decision. He offered Elena a position not as a housekeeper, but as the director of accessibility and inclusion for his tech company. Her insights about communication, her understanding of different abilities, and her natural ability to bridge worlds made her invaluable in creating technology that served everyone. But more than that, he offered her a place in their family. Not as an employee, not as a helper, but as someone whose presence had transformed their house into a home. Elena had shown them that the most profound connections often happen in silence, that the most beautiful conversations are conducted with hands and hearts, and that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who see us most clearly. The final scene of this story takes place in the same kitchen where Marcus first watched his children turn math into magic. It's a Sunday morning, and the family is making pancakes together. Elena is there, officially part of the family now, her engagement ring catching the light as she helps Lily measure ingredients. Marcus and Lucas work together at the griddle, father teaching son the perfect timing for flipping pancakes, while son teaches father new signs he learned at school. The kitchen is noisy with the sounds of cooking and quiet with the beauty of signed conversations. Flour dusts every surface, batter splatters the stovetop, and syrup somehow ended up on the ceiling. But every mess tells a story of connection. Every sticky fingerprint is evidence of love actively shared. As Marcus looks around at his family, his children who taught him to see joy differently, Elena who taught him to love more inclusively, and Sarah's memory that continues to guide them all, he realizes that he almost missed this. He almost remained the lonely king in his perfect, silent castle. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone comes into your life and teaches you to dance, even when you think you've forgotten how to hear the music. This story reminds us that the most important conversations often happen without words, and that love finds a way to communicate across any barrier. If this touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Like this video, leave a comment telling us about a time when someone changed your perspective on what it means to truly listen. And subscribe to Billionaire in Love for more stories that celebrate the unexpected ways people transform each other's lives. Because sometimes the people who seem invisible are actually the ones who help us finally learn to see.